More than a foot of rain triggering flash floods, submerging vast areas along Interstate 2 from McAllen to Mercedes, Texas.
Yes, we woke up, it was around 3 in the morning, and we saw outside that everything was flooded, everything.
85-year-old Francisca Ramirez, a longtime resident of Weslaco, says she's never seen it like this.
Just raining, it can't keep on coming, and I'm scared.
All right, guys.
Well, you're in good hands now. You're rescued.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Overwhelmed first responders.
We got other people to take out as well.
Getting a helping hand from volunteers. These good Samaritans taking Ricardo Rangel, who can't walk, to high ground. In some cases, the water's so deep, military trucks had to back up to find a different route out. Juanita Gomez asleep as the floodwaters quietly began to rise.
When I woke this morning at 8 o'clock, I stepped in the water.
You stepped right out of your bed into water?
Yeah.
Motorists stalled in deep water, breaking out glass when electric windows stopped working. Roads giving out, creating sinkholes in McAllen. Because a flood like this here is so rare, most homeowners say they have no flood insurance. Experts say the long-term drought and the sun-baked soil compounded the impact of the flood. And this misery will likely continue. Forecasters say the threat of more flash floods will continue through the night.
Pollution officials blame dust storms in western India for the dangerous air quality in New Delhi that continues to put residents at risk for a fourth day, June 15th. The air quality index measured levels in New Delhi at a severe level of 445, where the maximum reading is 500. Anything above 100 is considered hazardous for people's health. Authorities advise citizens to stay indoors as the conditions are expected to linger for another 3 to 4 days. One resident took to social media with her concerns, tweeting, quote, "Right now the dust in Delhi is so severe it feels like you're swallowing it. One can barely breathe properly. If this isn't an emergency, I don't know what is." Last month, the World Health Organization released a report that ranked Delhi as the 6th most polluted city in the world. For United News International, I'm AJ Walker.
Orlando International Airport just became the first U.S. airport to scan the faces of all international travelers as they leave the U.S. and as they arrive. But expanding the government's facial recognition network is likely to be controversial, since there still aren't clear rules on how the system should be used. The Department of Homeland Security calls it the Traveler Verification Service, or TVS. Air travelers leaving the country will now have their faces scanned in at least 9 U.S. airports. If they land at Orlando, they'll have their faces scanned on the way into the country, too.
Really, it's just part of the boarding process to pause for a second, have an image taken, compared to images that are already on file, and then the boarding continues.
But recent research from privacy experts at Georgetown University finds TVS is a serious escalation of biometric scanning of Americans. They say it could be ripe for abuse because there are no codified rules that constrain it. Some airlines are allowed to use their own cameras and computers to scan faces, for example. But DHS doesn't require them to delete images, so airlines can hold on to them for business processes for an indefinite amount of time. More to the point, some lawmakers say Congress has never made laws on how TVS should apply to U.S. citizens in the first place. Georgetown's research found TVS is unreliable and could lead to travel delays if it gets faces wrong. The American Civil Liberties Union worries TVS and similar programs could make it easier for facial recognition to creep into U.S. life. For now, at least, U.S. citizens can still opt out of getting their pictures taken. But it's like opting out of the X-ray in the TSA line. If they don't want to be on camera, they'll have to get their identity verified another way.
An IBM computer has won against 2 experienced human debaters.
If I may put it a bit differently, subsidizing space exploration is like investing in really good tires.
These are the words of artificial intelligence. The company unveiled the system it has been working on for more than 5 years in San Francisco, June 18th. The Project Debater demonstrates computers are getting better at learning human language and speech. The computers matched against 2 humans, and their arguments were judged by an audience in attendance. IBM selects the topics, but neither the human debaters nor the computer get them in advance. The computer pulls in evidence from its memory of hundreds of millions of newspapers, journals, and other sources in real time and uses it to support its argument. For United News International in Tokyo, I'm Jung-Soo Kim.
Down the gangplank, first cautious steps into Europe. Under warm blankets, their eyes soak in first impressions of the land they hope will bring a better life. Help for some to hobble to a waiting ambulance. That young man is blind. Tonight, rescuers saved 33 lives, including 5 women and a child. It's now just after midnight, and those refugees and migrants who have just reached dry land had clearly been many hours at sea. They will now be taken away to a holding area where police will register them, and they will receive attention from the Red Cross. In a fenced corner of the port, Red Cross workers start health checks. Police begin the paperwork and checks to confirm where in Africa they're from. For now, there's no access for media. Morning, back at dockside, we meet Captain Frank Perez of the Marine Rescue Service, who commanded the previous day's mission.
They were in a rubber dinghy about 6 meters long and a 15-horsepower engine. There were 33 of them. They were frightened because they didn't know they were going to make it, but this time they were lucky.
One of his crew recorded tense moments of the rescue on a helmet-mounted camera. This was 100 kilometers off the coast of southern Spain. Firm commands for the refugees to stay still so they don't capsize. They're scared. The first group is shuttled to the main rescue boat. Some are sobbing. A handshake, both a thank you and a welcome. One of the rescuers calls out that one of the incoming passengers is blind.
The reason I do this job is for the satisfaction of saving human lives. Once they were on board, they feel totally safe and begin to shout and cheer.
This weekend, European Union leaders will wrangle over immigration policy and border controls. But here there is no politics. The only aim is saving those in peril on the sea. Carl Penhall, Al Jazeera, Almeria, Spain.
Monsoon rains fall and Tahira Begum reflects on a hard year. Tahira, her husband Mohammed, and their 6 children have lived in Kutupalong camp since they fled Myanmar in December.
We have lots of sorrow in our heart, so much pain. I can't explain in words. We do not have peace of mind. Myanmar is our home. This is not our place. But what can we do? We cannot go back there now. They will kill us there.
But here they are vulnerable too. The foundations of a new life has literally collapsed beneath Mohammed's feet. The monsoon season has started. They live in bamboo huts on muddy hills alongside 1 million other Rohingya refugees. 3,300 shelters have collapsed so far. Now the family shares 2 rooms with 20 others. Nearly 700,000 Rohingya have fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh since a military crackdown intensified last year. Those who escaped told the stories of those who didn't. Mass burial pits, children raped, villages razed.
Many of my relatives were killed in Myanmar, and I couldn't bring one of my daughters and my mother. I had to leave them behind and some of my other relatives.
Myanmar and the UN have agreed on steps for the Rohingya to return, but many say it's not enough.
We will not go back, even if there is an agreement, until and unless they recognize us as Rohingyas and give us citizenship.
And so the Rohingya prepare for the long haul. They fix their homes and build bridges, roads and water wells. For more than half the population, this is their introduction to the world. 55% of Kutupalong's residents are children. An education here is learning the acronyms of aid groups or counting the minutes one must stand in the rain waiting for rice. Tahira's children are too young to help, but they savour the sustenance. The sound of prayer is heard across the camp during one of the few happy times of the day.
Even though we are facing a lot of hardship, we still manage to eat something. It's difficult to cook though because we rarely find firewood and other essentials. Plus, we don't have any money.
This is what survival looks like in what is now the world's largest refugee camp. Charlotte Bellis, Al Jazeera.
The ferry sank on Lake Toba, a tourist destination in North Sumatra, on Monday. But only a handful of bodies have so far been recovered from the water, despite a search involving hundreds of rescue workers. And grieving relatives are growing impatient. Lake Toba is known as the world's largest volcanic lake. At some point, it's at least 500 meters deep. The wooden ferry, built to carry 43 passengers, was heavily overloaded and sank in bad weather. There were 21 survivors.
When the ferry started to tilt, I raced to the top of the boat, but my friends were still below the deck. Everyone that jumped off climbed to the top again, so it sank. I held 2 people, but there were others clutching to my feet from the water, so I had to let them go, because I started drowning again. I kicked them away.
Initial figures suggested 80 people were on board, but that's now risen to almost 200. The transport minister doubts the figure is that high, but with no passenger list or record of ticket sales, the exact number may never be known. Ferry accidents are common in Indonesia, where safety measures are often not enforced. The president is demanding action.
Saya minta kasus seperti ini jangan sampai terulang lagi.
I ask for these kinds of disasters to never happen again, and I am ordering the Minister of Transportation to evaluate all safety procedures and standards of transportation vehicles.
Using an underwater drone, rescue workers are trying to locate the vessel in the murky depth of the lake. Once found, they hope more bodies can be recovered.
While relatives are waiting for answers, the government is under pressure. Another ferry disaster highlights that safety procedures are not being followed. Lake Toba has been chosen by President Joko Widodo as one of the country's main tourist destinations, but many fear that visitors will think twice before traveling by boat. Step Fasten, Al Jazeera, Jakarta.
Fighters of the Syrian Arab Army SAA and the Tiger Forces have liberated the villages of Musayka and Al-Dalafah from militant groups in northeastern Dara. Thus, they de facto besieged the militant-held area of Al-Lajat and cut off the supply lines to it. According to pro-militant sources, at least 7 government fighters were killed and a vehicle and a battle tank were destroyed in the clashes. On June 19, units of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda, attacked an SAA position in the area of Al-Fuqara in northern Latakia. 9 soldiers and officers of the SAA were killed. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and other militant groups continue to undermine the de-escalation zones agreement reached by Turkey, Iran, and Russia in the Astana format. The further escalation of actions by militants in northern Latakia, southern Idlib, and western Aleppo may force the SAA and its allies to implement a military option to put an end to these attacks. On June 20th, the Syrian state media announced that the SAA had cleared 2,500 kilometers squared between Palmyra and Humaima in the province of Homs from ISIS cells. Government troops secured at least 14 settlements during these efforts. Separately, the SAA cleared 1,200 kilometers squared between the areas of Faidat ibn Muyniyah, the T2 station, Maizliya, and the Khrat Wadi al-Miyah in the southern part of Deir ez-Zor province. The Syrian military also deployed additional reinforcements in a border town, Al-Bukamal, which has recently faced a series of attacks by ISIS. Government forces also achieved notable gains against ISIS cells in eastern Al-Suwaidah, where they secured 11 various locations, including settlements and important hills. Despite this, hundreds of ISIS members are still reportedly operating in a desert area. Representatives of the Syrian government and opposition are expected to have a meeting on a constitutional committee on July 10, according to Qadri Jamil, a leader of the so-called Moscow platform of the Syrian opposition. However, there is still a problem with forming the list of opposition representatives. In other words, some Turkish-backed groups are ignoring this initiative. Separately, Russian presidential envoy for Syrian Alexander Lavrentiev said that the Kurds will be represented in the Constitutional Committee. There will be Kurdish members of the opposition and government delegation, as well as civil society members. We call for refraining from attempts to divide the Kurds into pro-Turkish, pro-Syrian ones, and those associated with the People's Protection Unit and the Democratic Union Party that Ankara views negatively, he said. The establishment of a committee tasked with drafting a new Syrian constitution is one of the key points agreed in a framework of diplomatic efforts by Damascus, Ankara, Tehran, and Moscow to solve the current crisis in Syria by peaceful means.
Russia has said it is skeptical about a UN report that has accused the Syrian government of committing crimes against humanity during the battle for eastern Ghouta. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the report is based on data obtained through social media and videos that were not put together on the ground. He was speaking at a press conference in Moscow. The report, which was published on Wednesday, has accused both Syrian forces and militants of war crimes. It said government troops deliberately starved civilians. The report also said some 20,000 militants in eastern Ghouta shelled the capital in attacks that killed and maimed civilians. Eastern Ghouta, on the outskirts of the capital, was captured by the Syrian army in April.
Now, as for the next story, Taliban militants have killed 30 Afghan security forces in the west of the country just a few days after the end of a brief ceasefire with the government. The governor of Badghis province has confirmed the fatalities, saying that the militants captured a military base following the ambush attack. He said that 15 Taliban militants were also killed in the overnight fighting. A nationwide truce between the Afghan government and the Taliban came into effect in Eid al-Fitr holidays, which marked the end of the fasting month of Ramadan. The militants only abided by the 3-day pause and rejected the government appeal to extend it. President Ashraf Ghani then had to extend the measure unilaterally by 10 days. Japan has reportedly decided to halt its missile drills following attempts to de-escalate tensions on the Korean peninsula. Japanese media says that the government has notified several prefectures of the decision, citing the international situation as the reason. 9 prefectures were set to carry out the exercises following North Korea's 2016 missile tests. Now, the missiles flew over Japan. The halt of the military exercises comes after a June 12th summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The two pledged to take steps to end tensions and work for peace.
U.S. President claims that North Korea has begun the process of total denuclearization. Speaking at a cabinet meeting in the White House, Donald Trump stressed Pyongyang is in the process of blowing up 4 of its biggest test sites. It's not immediately clear which test sites Trump was referring to. Pentagon has not commented on Trump's remarks. On Wednesday, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis said that he's unaware if North Korea had done anything toward denuclearization. On June 12, President Donald Trump held a summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore. Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, or the PMF, have vowed to respond to an air raid which killed 22 of its members on the Syrian border this week.
Until now, the culprit of the air raid has not been proven, but it cannot be anyone but the Americans or the Israelis. The airstrike came either from the Israelis or the Americans. When the culprit is confirmed out of these 2 countries, there will be a suitable response.
A spokesman made the remarks that is during a funeral ceremony in the Iraqi capital Baghdad. Another PMF official said that America and Israel know the important role the force plays to cleanse Daesh remnants along the Iraq-Syria border. He added that the message of the airstrike was clear. A Syrian military source accused the United States of conducting the strike. U.S. has rejected the accusation. U.S. media reports citing American military sources suggest Israel was behind the killings. Both Syria and Iraq condemned the air raid. PMF is an integral part of Iraq's security forces.